I always loved to rummage around in my grandpa's old stuff. So many weird artifacts, old pictures, the odd war memorabilia that probably shouldn't see the light of day. He wouldn't let me keep any of the stuff though, but I could play up in that attic for hours, diving even further into my own messed up fantasies. But that's before I found the ruler, and the rules of the ruler. The ruler rules, as it were. It was hidden in a small chest, like a jewelry box. I hadn't seen it before, which I found it extremely strange, since I was pretty sure I'd gone through just about every inch of that place. But there it was, centered on the floor, in plain sight. A small box inscribed with strange glyphs or what have you. I didn't think twice about it and opened it almost before my fingers reached it. To my utter dismay, there wasn't anything in it other than the old ruler and dusty parchment, upon which some passages were written in plain English. I looked the parchment over suspiciously. Did the boring old ruler come with homework? That's like the worst treasure ever. I shrugged and started reading. Keep this on the person at all times, or in the box it came with. Do not measure anything with it. Important. If you chew on it, make sure you spit it out in tepid holy water. Roughly 105 degrees Fahrenheit or thereabouts. Always greet your new friend under the bed. If you should forget any of these rules, place the ruler back in the box post-haste. Don't worry about the previous owner. They will be fine. Trust me, just fine. What a load of old hooey, I thought. Although deep down it did intrigue me. I won't deny it. I'd been a sucker for weird stuff like this since Dan the dog told me about the No Front Man, and, for different reasons altogether, the Zipper Girl. Horror, mysteries, scary stories, fucked up shit. What if? What if this thing was real? I knew I was way too superstitious to ignore the ruler's rules. So I gently placed it back in the box and hid it under my shirt. I ran down the stairs and yelled a brief goodbye to my grandfather before I headed home to try to make sense of the strange old thing. I don't know how long I sat in my room, just looking at it, inspecting it, admiring it. What had looked like nothing but a boring old ruler now appeared wonderfully sinister. All these strange, indecipherable markings were intriguingly foreboding. I researched whatever old forgotten languages and hippogriffs, or whatever you want to call them, I could come across, but not a single symbol even came close to the ones on the ruler. They were old, ancient, archaic, primeval, pragmatic, and somehow I just knew they had some power or other. But what? I tried waving the thing around like a wand, shouting, Avada Kedavra, at our stupid neighbor Travis, who insisted on blasting Vanga Boys on his shitty boombox 24/7. But nothing seemed to happen. I sighed and just slouched down in my chair, gently caressing the ruler like a morbidly underweight puppy. Forget something. A wheezy voice called from under my bed. I fell off the chair from the shock, feverishly crawling towards the door as I realized what was going on. I'll let it slide this time, the seemingly disembodied voice said, but don't make a habit of it. Who are you? I stuttered. I'm the friend under the bed, it said. Didn't you read the rules? Oh, by the way, you should probably go comfort your mom. What? Was all I could muster. Why? Your dear old grandpappy is dead, kiddo. Like one of them doornails. It chuckled. Better go make her feel better. Wouldn't want to admit it was your fault, though. Not sure how sweet mommy would take that. I quickly scrambled to my feet and threw open the door, running hysterically into the living room, only to find my mom sobbing inconsolably on the floor, gripping the phone tightly in her right hand. "Mom?" I asked. What's wrong?" "Oh, baby," she whimpered. "It's your grandfather. He is dead." I couldn't believe it. Some kind of twisted joke, surely. Pruny, middle-aged moms pull those all the time, right? Just a prank, bro, all like. But no, it wasn't. It was true. He'd been taking a walk soon after I left, up the trail to Pronged Point, where he'd been mauled to death by a mountain lion. Weird thing is, it was the only registered mountain lion in the area to this date. I tried my best to comfort my mom, but she was in total shambles, and I knew, deep down, I knew it was all my fault. As I was sitting there, cradling my own devastated mother, a sudden realization hit me. The ruler's rules. I didn't have the ruler on me. I threw my sobbing mom aside in a fit of adrenaline-fueled panic and bolted to the room, pouncing at the ruler still lying on my desk. I was mere seconds from putting it back in the box when I was interrupted. "Forget something again?" The wheezy voice called. I turned around. It didn't come from under the bed this time. It came from my door. It came from the unsteady body of my mom, swaying back and forth in my doorway. Only it wasn't her anymore. She had this horrible warped smile on her face, and her lips were black like a demon's unwashed armpit. She held a kitchen knife to her own throat and could spot a few droplets of blood trickling down her neck. Mom?" I asked sheepishly. "What's, going on?" "I ain't your mom, kid," it said. "But you know that. You messed up the rules again, bucko. Thrice now. Can't have that. Need to set things straight." It slowly started carving into the neck with the knife. I could see the droplets of blood multiplying, forming small streams as the knife made its way to the other side. "No!" I yelled quickly and grabbed the box from the desk. "Look, kid," it said, a suspicious hint of anxiety in its voice, before dropping the knife to the floor limply. "I'll leave her alone. Yeah. Bygones and all that, you know. Just don't put the fucking thing back in the box." "Screw you," I yelled as I rammed the thing down the box as hard as I could. Like magic, really dark fucking magic, I guess, my mom collapsed on the floor the moment I closed the lid, eyes rolling back into her head all freaky like. Not quite knowing what was the appropriate medical response, I resorted to dragging her to the living room couch and left her kinda hanging over the edge of it. When she came to a couple of hours later, I explained to her that she probably suffered a mental breakdown because of all the stress or something. I've never told her what happened, the truth I mean, and I never will. Look, I don't pretend to understand anything that happened that day, but I know it all had something to do with that box, with that ruler, with the ruler's rules. My mom slowly recovered from all the weird shit, and things soon got back to normal. That's life, you know? But as soon as I got the chance, I buried that box. Deep. Real deep. Well, as deep as I could manage, which I guess was about 20 inches. The years passed by, and eventually a great big bush grew over the box. I'm no bush lover, of the plant-like variety I mean, but it had some pretty big leaves and always smelled faintly of week old magazines left in the waiting room of a dentist office. I don't know how that works, but there you have it. I suppose that's the reason why I'm writing this today. Nostalgia, I mean, or an all-consuming sensation of unfiltered dread. One of the two for sure. I just want my story to be known as a warning, perhaps, an epitaph of sorts, I fear. I woke up this morning, and there was this big old hole in the ground where the bush once stood, and the box was nowhere to be seen. Two years ago, I bit the dust. Laying on an operating table, my soul left my body. It was February 2018. I was just 27. I was taking the drive to work and boom, out of nowhere, I got hit by some redneck in a pickup who ran a stop sign. The bastard was drunk. The steering column narrowly missed my head, which would have killed me instantly. Instead, I ended upside down with shrapnel from the dashboard of my 1995 Civic between my 7th and 8th vertebrae. I was wheeled to Mass General, where a team of surgeons tried to save my life. That's where I died. It's a crazy thing, looking down at your corpse and hearing the flatline as nurses and doctors struggle to bring you back. I wasn't scared though. It wasn't fear I was feeling. It was confusion. You know, like, that's me. But I'm me. That's when everything stopped. It froze. Everything. The doctors and nurses. The people in the hallway. The long beep from the heart rate monitor. Everything suddenly froze, and at that moment, I saw him. An elderly man in an Irish flat cap, button-up shirt, and khakis. He was the only thing still moving. He entered the operating room and looked at me. He looked at me with a kind understanding. He smiled slightly and opened his mouth to speak, but stopped to think for a moment. I fidgeted around waiting for him to say something. The silence was so thick, and terror was finally beginning to set in on me. I blurted out, "Who the fuck are you?" His slight smile left his face. He seemed saddened by the question. "You know me by a few names," the man said in his deeply gravelly voice with a standard non-Southern American accent. "I'm Death, or the Grim Reaper, or Anku, or whatever else you'd like to call me." I laughed. It was hysterical to me. This old man couldn't be the personification of death. I laughed for a bit before looking back at the man and seeing he was entirely serious. If I could have seen my face, I know it had been devoid of all color. I couldn't handle that fact yet, so I said plainly, "Fuck that, and fuck that." I walked out of the operating room and down the hallway of the hospital. As I exited, it was clear that this whole frozen in time shit was hospital-wide. I tried to shake a few people in an attempt to wake them up, but it was no use. Walking slowly behind me, whistling Danny Boy, was the old man. I turned around to face him. You know what that son of a bitch said to me? He says, "Ready to face your own mortality?" I was about to punch that motherfucker in the face when that thought finally ran past my head. Could I really be dead? No. I'm only 27. I have so much ahead of me. I just got a promotion. Catherine, my girlfriend, is moving into my apartment. I guess I was thinking for too long because the old man said, "Listen, kid, I have a lot of people to visit. These encounters aren't really supposed to take more than 20 minutes. You've taken up 10 already, and I haven't even begun the explanation yet. So, if you could stop asking a million questions in your own head and let me tell you what's going on, we can get this over with." I listened to each word he said, and although I was terrified and confused, I sat down on a bench in the hallway next to a frozen man and prepared to listen. The slight smirk returned to the old man's face. "Good. So you're dead. Drunk driver crashed into you. Depending on the kind of person you were in life, you'll go to heaven or hell. Hell is a pretty universal world. Both these places are ruled by omniscient beings." He pulled out a small pad of paper from the pocket of his pants. "By the looks of it, you'll be going." He looked back at the paper confused. "Huh? Haven't had one of you in a while." I was still processing everything of what had just been said to me, but I still said, "One of what?" My voice was shaky, scared. He replied, seemingly annoyed. "An undecided soul. You weren't good or bad in life. You were an even mix of both. See, some people get close to a perfect balance, but almost all tip one way. Your type are very uncommon." This confused me even more. I always thought I was a good person, but maybe some of my actions were questionable. "Perk up, kid. This means you might not spend eternity in hell." He smiled at me. I looked back up at him, my mouth agape, tears in my eyes, and attempting to stutter out a sentence. "What does it mean?" Death laughed in my face. "Oh boy, even I can't answer that. Officially, I'm supposed to tell you that this is an anomaly." This didn't exactly calm my nerves. "What happens next?" I asked less shakily, finally adjusting to things in my brain. "All it is what with you. You can use other words to start a sentence, you know. As for your question, I have no clue. I imagine you'll be brought down to hell and then to heaven. That's what they did with the last guy." He shrugged and began to walk away. "Wait, death." He turned around and smugly stated, "Death usually waits for no man. But what is it? You got a minute left." Scared and confused with no one to comfort me, I simply asked, "What if I need help?" He chuckled. "Just ask." With that, death was gone. I sat there for a while. I don't remember exactly how long I sat there, but eventually, even though I was dead, I fell asleep. As I awoke, I was no longer in the hospital. I was sitting on a park bench. When I woke up, I figured it was a dream, that some hobo had injected me with like heroin or something, and that it was all a bad trip. But I was wrong. I was sitting in Central Park, and as I looked around me, everything was still frozen. Just minutes ago, I was in Boston, and now all of a sudden I'm in New York. I'm glad that no entity spoke to me at that moment. Honestly, it would have terrified me even more. Thanks to the time given to me on that park bench, maybe 2 hours, I was able to process things. I cried. I feel comfortable saying that because we all would do the same. Who wouldn't sob if they had just found out they were dead? I'm thankful for the time I was given. I then met him, the being people have feared since the dawn of man, Satan. I could see him from across the park. The images used by the Catholic Church are not so accurate. I was expecting an 11-foot tall goat man, but instead, I was looking at a biker. He almost looked like The Undertaker from WWE during his leather and motorcycle phase. Death had told me I was going to hell first, but I didn't know I would be meeting the man himself. He walked in a perfectly straight line, even walking through the fountain in front of me. Yet there was no splash and no water stuck to his boots or jeans. He sat down next to me, expressionless. I turned to look at him. His beard was unkempt and his hair was cut short, and there was a bandana tied around his head. I decided to speak first. Are you God? Or... He cut me off. The devil? Mr. Scratch? Yeah, that's me. His voice wasn't like Death's. It was inhumanly deep and as raspy as an 1800s mine worker. He carried his words, dragging them out longer than necessary. But for whatever reason, his speaking gave me a strange comfort and confidence. My fear melted away. I think it was his doing. He wanted me to feel calm while speaking to him. Still, I can't explain it. I can't explain any of this. With this newfound artificial confidence, I no longer feared speaking to him. Is this hell? Why would you pick Central Park? He laughed at my question. No, this is closer to the waiting room. The king. He pointed to the sky, and I have an agreement for undecided souls. I cannot show you hell. He cannot show you heaven. You must make your own decision. This seemed like idiotic terms for the devil to agree to. I'm allowed to choose? Of course I'd pick heaven every time. A paradise. After a few seconds taking this in, I retorted, Are you not evil? I went to church as a kid. You're the embodiment of true evil. He nodded. Yes, this is correct. However, you failed to see without evil there isn't good. I forced the world to be better. Indirectly. The king takes a more straightforward approach. I force the world to adapt by making hard times. He sends a Mother Teresa to fix everything. But in the end, it yields the same result. A better world. I am evil. I enjoy chaos. But I still like humans. I still like the earth. So the question for you is, do you want to be the straightforward, easy fix? Or do you want to add to the hard times the earth is facing to make them adapt? The decision is only yours. But I was dead. How could I add or take away from evil or good in the living world? I had so many questions, none of which I asked. We sat there for a bit. I had never looked at things the way he had described. We talked some more. He told me things I can't share here. Things about me and family that I really just don't feel comfortable sharing. By the time we were done, I had a new respect for him. I had always looked at him as just evil, but that conversation showed me there was far more to the one they call Satan. He stood up. This was interesting. I haven't really spoken to someone in a long time. Do me a favor. I looked up at him. Don't let the king give you a sermon. Listen to what he has to say, but do not be influenced by holy speech. His commandments can't save you anymore. With that final message, he was gone. My talk with the Dark Lord of the Underworld was brief, but it held such an impact. I will never forget my conversation with the devil. I was expecting him to tempt me, like Jesus in the desert. He isn't what you think, truly. Unlike after my conversation with Death, I wasn't given time. I blinked, and when I opened my eyes, I was sitting in an entirely white room. The park bench I was sitting on was replaced with a white couch, and in front of me was a wooden table with 2 scotch glasses and a crystal bottle of the hard stuff. There was an empty chair across from me. Behind the chair, there was a door, still entirely white. It was like a fancy bathroom. The doorknob rattled and in stepped my father, a tall man with a clean-shaved face and a neat crew cut. I stood up, shocked. My father had passed away 10 years prior. Tears began to stream down my face. "Dad?" He shook his head. "This is going to be hard to explain. I don't know what form I am appearing to you in, so I apologize if it isn't what you were expecting. I am your creator, so subconsciously, you see me as your physical creator. It's quite common actually. There's no need to fear." He spoke in exactly my father's voice. "You probably have a lot of questions, so I'll get things out of the way. I am God. I am Allah. I am Yahweh. I am Odin the All-Father. I am Zeus. I am Shiva. I am the universe. In many different countries at many different times, I have been interpreted differently. None are incorrect in their belief of what I am. I am all. I am absolute. You spoke to it, I'm assuming. I hope you took everything he said with a grain of salt. We've been in a 6 million year long game of chess. He isn't to be trusted." I knew he was speaking about Satan, but still, I didn't talk. I was enamored by the fact I was speaking to God, who looked and sounded exactly like my father, a man I had buried 10 years before that moment. He sat in the chair for the first time and poured himself a drink. Usually when there's a split-souled person, they are leaning one way by the time they get to me, but you are no closer to finding what you are at heart. May I ask why? I swallowed hard, feeling a lump get pushed down my throat. This has been a rough day, I suppose. He nodded understandingly. I can imagine. Being dead is extra tough for the first 30 seconds, especially when you're split-souled. I looked at him confused. 30? I'm sorry, 30 seconds? I've been here for almost 4 hours now. He seemed like he expected me to say that. Time is odd in purgatory, which is where you were. It moves and behaves strangely. Do you have any questions for me? I nodded yes. Is the Bible true? I had been debating myself with that very question for years, and finally, I could ask him that question. Every word of it, same with the Quran, and every holy text or mythology. It was true because they believed it. It existed because they believed it did, just not exactly in the way they thought. I shook my head no and laughed slightly. That doesn't make any goddamn sense. I now see the irony in saying goddamn to God. It wouldn't. Alright kid, decision time. I'll leave you here to think. Just walk through that door when you're ready. He left through the door he told me to walk through. I sat there, alone. Would I fix the world with hard times or with good deeds? What kind of person am I? With that thought, I remembered back to what Death had told me. If I need help, just ask. To an empty room, I said, I need help. I have no clue. I don't want to rot in hell, but I don't know what happens to me in heaven. I'm scared. For the 4th time that day, I broke down in tears, when suddenly I felt a hand on my shoulder. I looked up and I saw the face of the old man who had greeted me in the hospital, still wearing his Irish flat cap, button down, and khakis. Death had answered my call. Alright, trouble deciding, eh? Well, I have a few words for you. For what is a man? What has he got? If not himself, then he is naught. Those are Frank Sinatra lyrics. I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you to go with your gut. You won't regret it if you just make the decision. Good luck. My job is the same thing over and over, but you're different. Today was interesting. I'm rooting for you." He opened the door for me, and I looked at the black void in front of me. I stepped in and found myself surrounded by darkness. It was so cold and so lonely, but then there was light. I opened my eyes and I was lying on a hospital bed. I looked out the window and saw people walking down on the sidewalk below. A nurse entered my room and explained what had happened. That I died in surgery, but they managed to revive me. That I'd been in a medical-induced coma for 2 days. She explained that I could regain most motor function with physical therapy. She called it a miracle. I went through a lot of therapy, and my therapist, she says that it was a dream during my coma. I don't think so. I made my decision, and my decision was uncertainty. I imagine the next time I die will be my last. I just hope that I can make enough decisions in life to tip the scale one way. To this day, I know they're up there, playing chess, never winning, never losing. It will never end. I don't fear death anymore. He's an old friend. At around 8 in the night, me and my friend Jake were playing in the park. The sun's soon gone and the breeze is cool. There's nobody within sight, only Jake and me. It's silent and I can hear the grasshoppers somewhere around me. "Do you think I could flip around the swing?" Jake asks, staring at the swing. "If you go quickly enough," I say. We were like that, doing strange challenges. We had fun that way. Jake walks up to the swing and sits down. He looks at me filled with purpose. "Push me," he says. "To the moon?" I say, walking up behind him. "To the motherfucking moon," he repeats. The mood's solemn. For those few seconds, we weren't children but astronauts taking the first steps on the moon. We were men on a mission, and I was sure as hell going to complete that mission. I pushed, and he swung forward, and I pushed again, and he swung forward, and I ran alongside him, pushing as hard as I could. He began shouting. The metal chains to the swing rattled. The next second, he's falling through the air and lands on his back a few meters away. "Are you okay?" I ask, running up to him. Bro, did you see that? I fucking flew." We laughed. His phone buzzes. It's his mother. She wants him to come home for something. Jack curses. It doesn't sound good. He promises me he'll be back in a few minutes, and runs away. For a few minutes, I'm swinging forward and back on the swing, bored. My eyes scour the scene around us, looking for anything interesting to focus on. The swing was in the middle of the apartment complex. Tall red buildings surround me. The only way out is through a few tunnels in the corner of the buildings. Suddenly, I hear my friend Jake shout, "Hey Marcus, come over here." It came from one of the tunnels. I run over eager to see him and ask him what happened. The tunnel is completely empty. He's not here. "Hello?" I call out. "Over here," he says. The tunnel leads to another apartment complex, but inside there's also bicycle stands, vending machines, and stairs leading to the basement. My friend's voice comes from the basement. "Hurry up, I really want to show you something," he says. A bead of sweat runs down my forehead. I walk wearily towards the stairs. I've never been down there. It's always dark and dusty down there. Really scary. Suddenly, I feel a buzz in my pocket and I'm frozen in confusion. Mom says I can't go out anymore. Fucking bitch. A message reads. The message comes from Jake. But if Jake is at home, then who is down in the basement? I stand still, staring down at the stairs. Why are you taking so long? The voice from the basement says. I stand silent. Come on, Marcus. Stop being a tease. Why are you taking so long, you little shit? Come here. Now. Ha ha ha. You figured it out, didn't you? You little shit. A face burnt crisp creeps out from around the corner. It doesn't have eyelids. Its eyes are moon white and stretch out through their face. They stare at me like a drug addict staring at their chosen drug, but no matter what they do, they can't get it. The hair is like a few black strings hanging off. The lips are blue, like black eyes. They spread wide in a predatory smile. The lips go from ear to ear. The teeth are yellow and spiky. The creature's body is white with clear blue veins running everywhere through its body. I run away screaming. I run and run until my chest feels like it's about to explode. Finally, I stop. I finger through my tight pocket and grab my phone. I call Mom. I'm sobbing as I tell her to come pick me up. My sweet mother comes in less than 10 minutes after I call. We live roughly 15 minutes away. Her face shows in drowning worry. She runs up to me and hugs me. I look horrified, tears streaming down my face. What happened? She asked, suddenly staring at me. I see rage behind her eyes. Why is she mad at me? A man scared me. How? He tried to lure me into the basement. She hugged me tighter than she's ever done before. After, I jump into the car and close the door. Never have I been more thankful for locks. That would be my last time I was there in many years. On the way home, we picked up my favorite fast food. It all feels a lot better with my mother beside me. I feel a lot safer. We drive all the way home. I hug my dad. He's listening to Frank Sinatra's Fly Me to the Moon, singing along. I hug my mom and watch TV for a few hours past my bedtime. Today she allows it. My dad goes to sleep before me. He loves sleeping. He wouldn't wake up even if his bed was on fire. Eventually, my eyelids became heavier than I can handle, and my bed turns into a siren, singing its sweet song. I stumble towards my bed and jump in, covering me with my soon warm blanket. Hopefully, Mom won't get mad at me for not brushing my teeth. I wake up a few hours later. My dad's voice is calling me from the toilet. I groan and slowly get up. Marcus, get over here and explain yourself. I stumble towards the door and open it. I manage to say, "What is it?" "The mirror is broken. Was it you?" I freeze. "What?" I shout. "Don't play games with me, boy. The mirror is broken, and I want an explanation." My dad is blind. I'm standing in the middle of the hallway, shaking in horror. "Who's in the bathroom?" I stand still, unsure of what to do. "What is taking you so long?" "Marcus, don't make me wait." "You figure it out again?" The voice says. "Ha ha ha ha. I'm getting rusty, I guess." The bathroom door opens. His head peeks out. I scream and run back into my room. I shiver and shake in my bed. My mom comes running over. She asks me what happened, and I tell her the man is back. It ends up with her searching through the entire house with a bat in her hand. She doesn't find anything. She concludes it's a bad nightmare. She sleeps in the same bed as me tonight to comfort me. I have trouble sleeping. The image of the man's creepy face won't leave me. A few nights later, I hear the TV on. My mom calls out to come down and watch it with her. I start walking down the stairs. I'm standing in the middle of the stairs as I hear my mom's voice come from behind me. I heard that too. A lot of us take our lives for granted. We look at people in the news, victims of crime, accidents, disasters, spare them with a passing thought, and think, that would never be us. We take little risks that could possibly turn into big disasters. But more often than not, nothing happens, and we carry on with our lives. I was one of those people. A little daring, a lot more stupid. I thought that I could handle 2 drinks, but it never occurred to me that I didn't need to be flat out drunk to fuck up. That just a little blurring of my eyes would be enough to swerve off the road and crash. That the last thing I remembered would be blood dripping down my chin, and a foggy figure outside my window. And now, we come to my current predicament. I woke up at around 11 a.m., but the first thing that I noticed was that something fell off. My body was too light. My hair tickled my elbows. It was long, longer than I'd ever kept it. I finally decided to look around, and it looked like a teenager's room. There were posters on the walls and those LED strips that everyone was putting up in their rooms. A feeling of dread started to settle in my stomach, and I began to look around for a mirror. I eventually found one in the closet, and it took everything I had in me to not scream. An unfamiliar face stared back at me. She had a thin face and thin arms, and looked almost sickly. Emily. That was the girl's name. I don't know how, but I somehow knew. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw something like a silhouette move. I quickly took a look around the room, but there was nothing there. I looked back into the mirror and for a split second, saw my own face looking back, which I almost didn't notice because it was so normal, until I blinked and saw the girl's face staring back. Memories of driving home, of the accident, started to come back to me. At this point, I was panicking. I mean, who wouldn't, if they found themselves in a strange place with a new body? There was a laptop on a desk in a corner of the room. I rushed over to it and searched for news on a recent car accident in my area. Eventually, I found an article that dated a few days back. Drunk driver crashes into a tree on freeway. The article didn't name me, but the date and area matched. In a comatose state. Injuries weren't fatal. Will survive. Doctors say state is unusual. At least, now I knew what had happened to my actual body. But if I was in this girl's body, then didn't that mean she was in mine? My mind was swimming with questions and possibilities, but nothing seemed to make sense. But first, I needed to know where I was and how I'd switch bodies with someone. I decided to get out of the room. This was my first time seeing this house, but I felt like I knew it as if I had grown up in it. I went down to the dining area. There was a middle-aged woman sitting at the dining table. "Look who finally decided to come out of her room," she said. I felt mildly annoyed at that statement, but said nothing. The word "mom" came to my head. I didn't reply. I didn't know how her daughter would have replied, and I didn't want to risk suspicion. So I took some cereal and went back up. This body was very hungry. I locked the door behind me. There was a phone on the bed, so I grabbed it and sat down. It unlocked with Face ID, and I started to go through the messages. Felt a little guilty doing that, but hey, can you really blame me? There were a bunch of them. A-class GC, some kid asking for notes, etc. But only 2 of them really stood out. First was a girl named Samantha. She and Emily seemed like really good friends. Older messages were mostly memes and jokes, but on scrolling down, the texts were replied at longer intervals, and they seemed to have argued about something. Teenage drama probably. I didn't care. Second was a guy named Chris. Most of his texts were angry, demanding something, or in general abusive. She hadn't replied much, except in an occasional okay or yes. A text dating a few days back had a meeting time and a spot given. He told me to bring it, or else I would regret crossing him. I looked at the date on the phone. The date he sent was today at 7 p.m. I looked at the clock. It was around 2 in the afternoon. I was in my car, driving home, when I noticed something in my rearview mirror. You know how sometimes you look at a silhouette that looks like a person, but then you switch on the lights and it's just your jacket? The figure in the rearview mirror gave me that same feeling. "Why did you kill him?" A voice asked me. "What? Why did you kill him? Kill who?" The voice was now screaming the same thing over and over again. "Why did you kill him? Why did you kill him? Why did you?" I woke up in a cold sweat. The dream had unsettled me. At some point, I had fallen asleep. It was 6 p.m. now. I remembered the text about the meeting. Now, common sense would tell me not to meet a person who only talked in swears, but I had no idea about this situation and needed to figure out how I might regret crossing him. Plus, a 16-something kid didn't scare me that much. I threw a jacket on top of what I was already wearing and grabbed a small purse to carry the phone. I typed the address into the Maps app. It wasn't that far, so I decided to just walk. On my way out, I saw the mom. Today was a Sunday, so I figured that she'd still be home, and quickly realized that I'd probably need to make up an excuse to explain where I was going. She was working on something on her laptop, and to my surprise, didn't say anything as I headed out the door. This struck me as odd, but it was more convenient for me that way, so I didn't think much about it. The meeting spot was a warehouse. It didn't seem like it was still in use, indicated by the graffiti that marked the walls and the doors that creaked with disuse. Chris was sitting in one corner and smoking a cigarette. "You're late, bitch," he said. I didn't like this guy at all. "So, why did you call me here?" I asked. "Huh? Did you hit your head or something? Where's my fucking money, bitch?" It seemed like Emily owed him something. I looked around the warehouse. There were some discarded little Ziploc bags on the floor. Drugs. So that's what Emily owed him for. "Don't tell me you forgot. You know what happens to people who can't pay back, right?" He started to pull a knife from his pocket, probably to scare me. "This will teach you not to forget my payment next time." It happened so fast. He brought the knife near my arm to slash me, but I caught his arm. He tried to writhe his arm out of my grip, but I pushed it back towards him, and the knife went straight through his throat. He gurgled something and slumped to the floor. I couldn't move. One day in this body, and I had killed someone. The blood had started to pool on the floor. There was some on my face and my body too. My mind kept going back to the voice in my dream. Why did you kill him? Was this what it had been referring to? How had it known? And most importantly, had it made me do it? The little neon sign in the window says psychic, but I'm not really psychic. Psychometric would be the appropriate term, but that doesn't make for a great sign, does it? Whatever the word, I've had this ability since I was a little girl. When I touch other people's objects and concentrate, I feel a part of them. It can be anything, an emotion, a sense, like a certain smell or touch. I've been working for 10 years now, in a dingy little office above a pizza parlor. From the inside, you wouldn't have a clue what I do. My office always smells like garlic, and I don't keep any of those usual trappings. No crystal balls, no tarot desks, no mysterious symbols or pentagrams. So, yeah, business is slow. But this afternoon, someone dropped in. He wasn't the usual clientele. A guy, only a bit past teenagerhood, wearing a Lakers t-shirt. Usually, my clients are about 30 years old and female. Oh, sorry, I must be in the wrong place, he said as soon as he walked in. No, this is right. I'm the psychic. He sniffed. Is that for vampires or something? It's from downstairs. Oh, what can I help you with? Well, Miss, he glanced at the name card on my desk. Miss Greenberg. My mom has been missing for 3 days. Police have been looking, but they haven't been able to find anything. She and my dad went up to a cabin in the Catskills for her second honeymoon. My dad said she took a walk in the morning, and she never came back. Oh, I'm so sorry. He forced a smile. Thanks. So, I was wondering if you could help me. Sure, I'll try my best. Do you have anything of hers with you? He frowned. What do you mean? I work best when I can touch objects that belong to the person in question. It's psychometry, I added, though the look on his face told me he had no idea what that meant. Oh, no, sorry, I don't. Oh, wait, yeah, I do. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a Swiss Army knife. He rather recklessly slid it across the table, and I watched it skitter towards me with apprehension. This knife? Yeah, it was my grandpa's, and then hers, and then mine. I keep it with me, always. I frowned. The less people who owned an object, the better. Otherwise, the signals get all messed up, and it was hard to pick out who was whom. Okay. So your grandpa had it first. No. This is a family heirloom. First it was my great-grandpa's, then my great-grandma's. Okay. I'll give it a shot, but I can't promise anything. I closed my eyes and laid my hands on the knife. As soon as my fingers touched the metal, 1,000 sensations assaulted me. Steel forged in a blazing fire, candlelight against the darkness, the scratch of a quill against parchment, a woman's blue eyes, snow falling to the ground. I concentrated, weaving through the sensations, trying to pick out the one that I needed, and then I saw her, or rather, was her. The smell of lavender filled my nose. I was standing in a humble kitchen, using the scissors of the knife to cut a loose thread off my shirt. My hands were small and nimble. Black curls fell down my shoulders, bouncing in my peripheral vision. "That's your mom?" I said, my eyes still closed. "The one who smells like lavender, with the curly black hair?" "Wow, yeah. Well, her hair is gray now, but yeah." My mind probed into the sensation, but there was nothing I could learn. Just more scenes of her in her home. I did see a little boy run past, who looked like a miniature version of the man before me, and that made me smile. "I'm sorry. There's nothing more I can learn from this object." I passed it back to him. "Do you have anything else?" "No." He hesitated. "I do have a photo she sent me. It's the last photo before she..." He trailed off. "I mean, it's not an object, but I was going to show it to you. I showed it to the police too. Thought maybe they'd see something I didn't." Photos, like all digital objects, were tricky. Occasionally I could pull a sensation from them. It wasn't impossible. People were imbuing a part of themselves in the text, art, and stories they created on a computer, just like they've been doing to physical objects since the dawn of time. But technology itself disrupted the senses. All the radiation, the processors, the chips, it all grew to a mechanical roar in my head that I couldn't block out. "Here," he handed me his phone. "I think you need to print it out, dear." "What?" "I can't just touch a phone. Too much noise." I pointed. "My office printer is right over there." 10 minutes later, the soggy photo is laying on the table in front of me. Before I touched it, I just looked. An older woman with curly hair and kind eyes was standing on the porch of a quaint little cabin. Next to her stood her husband, a stocky bearded man. Both were smiling, his hand tucked behind her waist. The forest, green and alive, extended for miles behind them. I slowly lifted my hands and pressed them into the photo. I first felt the tree swaying in the wind, the tree that the paper came from, then the drops of ink themselves, chemicals mixed and churning, smelly vats. I blocked that out, focusing past that, past the details, onto the picture on the page, the shapes and lines that drew the woman and her husband. And then I felt everything. I smelled the dirt of the forest, the pine wood of the cabin, heard the birds twittering in the trees, the soft breeze in my hair, felt the sun shining through my eyelids. But I felt fear, horrible, paralyzing fear, worse fear than I'd ever felt in my entire life, because I felt something else, cold, hard metal, poking into my back. A gun. I jerked my hands away. Instantly, the sensations fell away. I was back in the chair, back in the office. My heart pounded in my chest, and I stared at him, feeling dizzy. "Are you okay?" That child, that poor, sweet child. I am, I said, catching my breath. But I'm so sorry. I'm not sure your mom is. Have you ever imagined being isolated in the woods, alone, trapped in a high tower all summer, no contact with anyone but a radio with one other person? Sounds terrifying, right? Well, to me, that was just perfect. I should explain that for the summer, I have a seasonal job as a fire lookout in Black Hills National Forest in South Dakota. Honestly, it is a great job, or at least I think it is. I make almost just as much as I do at my real job, and have near endless amounts of free time to do whatever I want. Of course, I do have to actually do my job, but that summer we had seen nearly no fires, and the ones we did were small and put out in the matter of days. I should explain that these jobs are not easy to get at all. The only reason I have mine is that my father held this job for 26 straight years, which meant that I spent a lot of my childhood summers out here in these woods, exploring with my younger brother or listening to ghost stories around the campfire with my family. It was amazing, and honestly, I am so thankful for that. However, my father passed away 2 years ago, and I've been taking the job during the summers ever since. But last summer, something happened to me, and I am honestly not sure that I want to go back. There were only about 2 weeks left in the summer before I went back home to Rapid City, and I remember stepping out on the balcony of my tower to look at the sunset. I was admiring the vibrant pink clouds against the striking blue sky when I heard the voice coming from my radio. I walked back inside and grabbed the radio. I put it up to my ear to hear Olivia on the other end. "Are you there? West Rock, are you there? This is Red Arch. Come in, West Rock." I pressed the button down to speak to her. "Hello, Red Arch. This is West Rock. I'm here." "Hi, Noah. Are you looking at the sunset right now? It's crazy." I heard from the other end. "I was looking at the sunset," I replied. "Oh, sorry. Haha," she responded. "Don't worry about it. I can see it fine from inside. Hey, while I have you, can you believe that there are only 2 weeks left before we go home?" I asked her. "Well, 2 weeks starting tomorrow," she answered. "But no, it still feels like summer just started, and now it's already ending. How many of your little paintings did you get done this year?" 14. Well, 15 if I finish this one in the next 2 weeks, but I don't know if I will, I answered. "Not your best year," she said. "Not my worst either," I responded. I carried the little handheld radio with me out onto the balcony where I stared again at the colors of the sunset. "Wow, that sunset is really something tonight." "I know, right? I wanted to make sure you didn't miss it," she replied. I'm sitting in a single room surrounded by glass windows in all directions, so I don't think I would have missed it anyway, but thanks. We talked for a little more after that, but the only thing that I remember from that night is walking back out onto the balcony much later when the sunset had turned to nothing but hues of bright blue and the clouds were nothing but dark gray. That was always my favorite time of day, when it was late dusk and you could feel the crisp, cool air as you inhaled, and you could hear the weak breeze whispering through the trees. But that night, that late August night, I thought I noticed something strange. I wish I had just called it in that moment, but I convinced myself that it was nothing. In the seemingly endless field of pine trees outside my tower, I thought that I noticed a particular group of trees shifting a little, like something huge was walking through them, moving them aside. I was a little tired, so I rubbed my eyes, but it was still there. It's like they were moving out of something's way, or like they were being moved by something. I went back inside and picked up the radio to call Olivia again, but when I looked out at the spot where the pine trees were moving, it had stopped. I told myself I was just being crazy, and that I needed to get some sleep after a long day. I laid down, set my phone on the tabletop map in the middle of my place, and closed my eyes. It took me a while to fall asleep, partially because it was still early, and partially because I was honestly a little unnerved by the trees moving. I managed to make myself fall asleep. I remember I left one window partially opened just to let in some cool air during the night, but when I awoke, the wind coming through the window was unbelievable. Papers on my desk were blowing around, and it almost knocked down a cup of water off my bedside table. I got up quickly, walked across my room, listening to the creaking wood boards beneath my feet as I did so, and I grabbed onto the window to close it. It took an enormous amount of strength to close that window, surely because of the age of the building to my knowledge, but I practically had to jump into the air to finally shut it. I walked back over to my bed. I could still hear the strong winds against the windows, but I kinda liked that sound, so I ignored it. But I heard a shrill, sharp hollowing. I assumed it was because I wasn't able to shut the window all the way. I groaned and got back out of bed to walk over and close it all the way. But when I looked at the window against the screen, it had closed all the way. I even locked the window just to confirm that it was closed. But I kept hearing it. That howl, like the wind screaming through the window screen. But I had no other windows open. I looked around at each one just to confirm they were closed, but the howling persisted. I put my ear up to one of the cold glass windows to listen outside, and that's when I realized it. The howling wasn't coming from inside my room. No, it was coming from outside and staying outside. I grabbed the golden door handle leading to my balcony and I hesitantly turned it to step outside. The wind immediately hit me, and I had to stabilize myself just so I didn't fall over. But as I stood near the edge of the balcony, hands on the railing, I heard it, the howling. I listened and looked all over to try and find the source, but I couldn't find it. I thought to myself that it had to just be the wind, but I have never heard the wind howl so shrill and high-pitched. I looked out at the forest again and realized it. I saw it again. The trees were shifting and moving again, but this time it seemed more rushed and violent than before. They were moving in a linear path like they were being moved by something. I also noticed that the path was coming towards me. The shifting trees were headed for my tower. I wanted to go back inside, but I couldn't now. Of course I couldn't. I needed to see whatever was happening. It was getting closer and closer. Braced myself for whatever it was to hit me. My heart rate increased and I began to breathe rapidly out of sheer anxiety for whatever was about to happen. It just kept getting close. I began counting down the seconds until it hit me. 5. I'll be safe in the tower. It's at least 40 feet tall. 4. It is a very old building though. I don't know how much it can withstand. 3. I should just go back inside and forget all this. 2. No. I need to see whatever is happening so I can call it in. 1. It's here. It was there. The wind stopped dead. The air in the night was silent. The howling had become absent. Standing at the edge of the clearing around my tower, shrouded in the showers from the pine trees, was some sort of creature. Extremely pale, human-looking skin, draped all over its body, but it walked unnaturally on all fours, and its neck was bent upwards almost. It looked like it was walking on stilts. The thing was at least 20 feet tall, standing on all fours. I froze. For a second, I didn't know what to do. My mind was blank of anything but questions. What was this thing? How was this even possible? Finally, my mind began to race as I began to think. I quickly ran back into my room, behind the safety of the walls and the windows. But as soon as I did, the creature started howling, or more accurately screaming. It was ear-piercingly loud. I cupped my hands over my ears and fell to the floor. I crawled carefully over to my gun safe and still shielding my ears best I could as I entered the 6-digit code into my keypad. It unlocked and I swung the door open to take out the small silver revolver I bought last summer. I loaded 6 bullets into it and prepared to step back out onto the balcony to look back at the creature. Before I stepped out, I grabbed the standard issue flare gun that we got at the beginning of every year. I tucked that into my pocket and stepped back out onto the balcony. When I did, the thing was gone. I didn't see it anymore, and the howling had stopped. I took a deep breath and looked over the edge. As soon as I did, a long, fleshy arm-like limb of the creature's hit me and knocked me back against the wall. I dropped a revolver and it went tumbling over the edge of the balcony, falling to the creature below. The creature screeched again, much louder and higher pitched than before. I grabbed the flare gun out of my pocket and pointed it over the railing. I saw its head, its face. It had 2 eyes, an almost human-like face, just scarred and scratched, and it had an ungodly number of teeth. Before it could move again, I pulled the trigger and the glowing red flare shot out of the gun and hit the creature dead center in the face. It screamed again, an ear-shattering scream, louder than anything I'd ever heard in my life. But I watched as it ran back into the trees outside the clearing. I ran back inside and locked the door. I slouched down onto the floor and tried to slow my breathing. I don't think I moved from that one spot the entire night, and I refused to look out any of the windows. I just sat, clutching the now empty flare gun in my hands, trying to calm myself. The next day I radioed in for an early departure and I was gone before sunset. I talked to Olivia one last time, told her some fake story about my cousin being sick and I needed to go see him, but I didn't look back as that helicopter took me away. I didn't look back for a second. I debated what I should do about it. Should I go to the police? Should I tell Olivia? Ultimately, I decided not to do either, partially because I didn't want to be known as that crazy guy, and mostly because, what are they going to do? They aren't going to believe me, and even if they did, what would they do? Olivia also told me she's not going back next summer, for unrelated reasons, so at least, I don't have to worry about that. But I don't know if I am going to go back either. My father held that job for 26 years, and I only held it for 3 summers. But I know that he would rather me be safe and happy than hold some stupid job as a fire lookout. To this day, I still cannot look. Can't even think about the forest without hearing the howling of that thing. And honestly, I don't think I'll ever forget it. I first saw it when I was eating dinner. a crescent-shaped fingernail clipping, lying on the carpet. "Aubrey," I yelled. I knew it was a mistake letting my little sister Aubrey live with me. She was a slob. There'd always be little hair stubs in the bathtub after she shaved her legs. After she ate a meal, I'd find a trail of crumbs, like she was Hansel trying to mark her path through the woods. And now she left a fingernail clipping on the floor. Absolutely disgusting. "Yeah?" Aubrey asked as she sauntered in. I pointed at the nail. "Is that yours?" "I don't know. Haven't clipped my nails in a while." I kinda just glared at her. Finally, she stooped over and picked it up. "Sorry," she muttered, dropping it in the trash. Maybe I was mean, but I'd had enough of her messing the place up. She was 20, damn it, and old enough to know she should clean up her messes. It was the least she could do while I let her live here rent-free, while she searched for a job. But lo and behold, I found more. On Tuesday evening, 2 crescent-shaped nails lying in the dead center of the living room. Their placement seemed intentional, honestly, like she wanted me to find them. The couch was all the way across the room. There was no way a nail, let alone 2, flew that far. "Aubrey," I growled under my breath. But that's what she wanted. She wanted to get under my skin. Otherwise, why would she leave them out like that? I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. I picked up the fingernail pieces and threw them in the trash. The next day, I found one neatly perched on the toilet seat cover. Okay, this is ridiculous. "Aubrey," I yelled. A few seconds passed. Then she poked her head in. "Yeah? Why are you doing this?" "Doing what?" I pointed to the fingernail clipping. "I didn't do that." I narrowed my eyes at her. "I didn't." "Okay, fine, whatever." I picked up the nail, dropped it in the toilet, and flushed, staring at her the whole time. I decided to set up some security cameras. That was probably overboard, but I already had a few cameras I'd gotten several months ago on the advice of a neighbor, and it was just one of those things that I'd never gotten around to. So I put up 2, one in the hall upstairs, one in the living room. I think she must have noticed I put them up, because I didn't find any more fingernail clippings for a week or so. Things got pretty good between us. Aubrey picked up more of the chores, and even made us dinner a few times. She was really falling into her adulting role. Everything came crashing down when I found the pile. A pile of fingernail clippings in the middle of my bedroom floor, neatly swept into a little pile. No, no, no. I stood there for several seconds. My anger started to boil. No, I won't give her the satisfaction. I crouched down and began scooping up the fingernail clippings myself. That's when I stopped dead. What the hell? These can't be Aubrey's. I had never really studied them up close before, but there was no way they could be Aubrey's. The nails were too large, like they belonged to a man's hand, and thick and yellowed, as if old. "Aubrey," she came running out. "Yeah? Did you put these nails here?" "No, I didn't." And then we heard it. A resounding thump above us. In the attic. We bolted. "Get in the car," I yelled, as we ran out the front door. As soon as she dove in, I clicked the lock shut, started the car up. Some fucker has been playing with us. I breathed. My hand dangled over the gear shift, ready to take off at any second. Call the police. As Aubrey called, I stared at the front door. Who was inside? I'd heard the news stories. Weirdos sneaking into people's houses and living there, undetected, for months. Was someone living in our attic? How long have they been there? Weeks? Months? Spying on us? Flashing red and blue lights appeared in my rearview mirror. We told the officers what was going on. Then we sat in the car, engine idling, as they searched the house. Aubrey didn't say anything. She just stared blankly, her face as white as a sheet. "I'm so sorry, Aubrey," I said, reaching out and squeezing her hand. "It's okay," she said, distantly. Then she turned to me. "This is so..." Snap, a gunshot. "Drive," Aubrey screamed. I shot out of the driveway. The car swerved onto the road. Then I put the pedal to the floor and sped down the road. The police found us 20 minutes later, huddled in fear in the parking lot of the HOA clubhouse. "Ma'am?" I rolled down the window. He shot me a friendly smile. "Don't worry, we got everything under control. There was a person living in your attic, a homeless man. Set up a little home for himself and everything." "How long was he living there?" Aubrey asked, her voice trembling. He shot us a reassuring smile. "Only a few days, at most." "Did you..." I choked on the words. "Is he... dead?" The officer's expression hardened. "Yes, he is, ma'am. I'm sorry. He was aggressive and violent when we confronted him. We had no choice." He sighed. "You'll have to find another place to stay for a few days. Okay?" And that was it. After giving him our statement, he bid us a goodbye and left. We ended up staying at my friend's house 20 minutes away. But as I lay in the darkness trying to fall asleep, something struck me. How long was he living there? Only a few days, at most. I'd found the first fingernail clipping almost 2 weeks ago. That's when I remembered the footage. I grabbed my phone from my pocket and navigated to the security app. I found the latest footage, dated a few hours ago from the hall camera, and pressed play. The image was low quality and grainy, but it was clear enough. I saw 3 officers walk down the hall. They stopped underneath the attic hatch, talking in low voices the camera didn't pick up. Then one of them, the one we'd spoken to, grabbed the string and yanked. He started up the stairs. The 2 other officers drew their guns, and one of them followed. Thumps echoed off screen as they walked around the attic. Then, snap, the gunshot. An unintelligible shot. The 3rd officer holstered his gun and disappeared. Then he came back with some equipment and went up. The screen showed the empty hallway. 5 minutes went by, then 10. Then the first one came back down. He was carrying something large in a body bag. Even with the low resolution, I could make out the rough shape of the head and shoulders, enshrouded in shiny black plastic. Nausea crept in my throat. There's a dead body in there. As much of a sicko as the guy was, I still felt awful watching. The next officer came down, and then the next. They grunted and groaned as they maneuvered the body down the stairs and into the hall. Wait, what the hell? The body bag. It was easily 8 feet long. The officers sighed as they heaved the immense thing down the hallway. The black plastic stretched and shone in the lights, showing off the contours that were unnatural for any human to have. Bony protrusions where elbows and arms should have been. A middle that was far too thin. I lay there, paralyzed, staring at the screen. That's when I first started having doubts about buying a house in Pelican Peak. What do you hope it's gonna be? Grace asked me as we stood on the hill, pulling up the late dandelions. I don't know. Something easy, I guess. As long as I get to live long. I wouldn't even mind if it was an accident, I said. I placed a fistful of dandelions in the pouch of my skirt and hugged it into my belly. I hadn't put much thought into how I wanted to die, even though I would finally find out tomorrow. My 13th birthday. It felt like a rite of passage, like getting your first period. Exciting and dreadful. I envied everyone older than me, like my sister, Amelia, who found out 2 years ago and wore the little charm bag around her neck as proof. She had never told me what it was, nor had any of my family, but there must be something powerful about knowing. Ever since, she had carried herself different, like a real woman. Grace's birthday wasn't for another 6 months, and I knew she'd be looking to me to answer her questions. I heard the quota hasn't been met for accidents this generation, she said, or different cancers, or heart attacks. I wouldn't mind a heart attack, I said, as long as I was old. Do you know who the council is for yours? She asked me. Nah, no one knows who the council is ahead of time. I know it will be the elders, but then there will be another 3 people from town who make the decision. What if it's someone you know? She asked. That'd be a good thing, I said, ripping the lush yellow flowers out of the ground. Hopefully they'd give me something easy. Unless they didn't like me. That is, if I was on your council, I'd just kill you myself. She laughed. I stood up and shoved her spitefully. She dropped the edge of her skirt and let the dandelion leaves tumble to the ground. Lacey, she shouted. I laughed. She riffled through the wreckage of blossoms. Here, she said, handing me the fluffy gray remains of one of the dandelions. Blow on it and wish for what you want. I forced all the air out, propelling the little iridescent tufts into the air. I wish it's something good, I said. I ran up to the house in my muddy, bare feet, leaving a trail of yellow dandelion petals behind me. My mother stopped me before I came in. She looked down at my feet but didn't say anything. Since it was coming up to my birthday, she wasn't scolding me as much. Sort out whatever leaves you got and feed them to the chickens, she said. And clean your feet off before you come in. I sat on the ground, pulling the leaves off the finger like roots. My mind couldn't help but wander. Grace had brought up a lot of things about my birthday that I hadn't thought about. How did the council decide what I was going to get? Would I really want to die in an accident? Wouldn't it be painful? What if I knew someone on the council? What if they hated me and gave me something terrible? That night, I didn't sleep, which was expected. My mother and father let me stay up with them in their room. I sat next to Mama in the bed, looking at the black charm bag she wore around her neck in the firelight. "You never told me what you got," I said to her quietly. "It's not something that needs to be spoken about," she said. "It's not good to know your mother will die." My father sat in the chair in the corner, poking at the fire. "You never told me how you were going to die neither," I said to him, more forcefully. "It doesn't matter," he said, still looking at the fire which illuminated the long, vertical wrinkles next to his mouth. "All that it matters is that it's no time soon, and that I'll always be here for you." I sighed, unsatisfied, and pulled up the blanket. "How does the council choose?" I asked. "They make it as fair as possible," Mama said. "They look at the quota for each generation and the life expectancy overall and try to make it balance out for everyone." "I hope I never have to be anyone's counsel," I said. "It sounds bad." "You probably will be, one day," Papa said from the corner of the room. I eventually fell into a fitful sleep in front of the fire. I woke up every few hours, fretting about what the morning would bring. By the time dawn came, my insides felt electric with worry, like I had swallowed lightning bugs. "You should have a good feeling about this," Mama said as she brushed and braided my hair. "You're about to be a big girl now, a real lady." Papa came into the kitchen and put on his jacket and hat. "You're leaving?" I asked him. "Aren't you gonna be there for my birthday?" I asked. "Shh," he said. "I'll be here when you get back. We can't go in with you anyways." Papa left and Mama dressed me in a long red dress and walked with me to the barn on the edge of town where it would take place. She didn't speak. "Please come in with me," I begged her as we approached the barn. "It's not gonna turn out good if you don't come in with me." "Lacey, you know I can't," she said. "You're a big girl now. You gotta do it by yourself. It's just how it's done." She steadied my shoulders and I turned to walk into the barn. I peeled away to the door and cast light onto the circle of elders that sat inside, raised on hay bales. Many of them had long gray braided hair and looked at me with soft focus. Before them sat 3 members of the council. 2 were men from the town that I didn't know, but in the middle was my father. "Papa," I whispered. I was confused. Was he on the council? "Lacey Brewer," one of the elders spoke. "A council has convened to determine the manner and timing of your death, in line with keeping of our community. Would the foreman please approach?" My father stood and approached me. Twisted shadows were thrown all down his long, wan face. He stooped down to my level and held out the black flannel charm bag and the slip of paper. "I'm so sorry, Lacey," he said. "You may read the decision," one of the elders said to me. I carefully unfolded the slip of paper, looking at each of the inked letters. Cause: breast cancer. Age: 19. I stifled my tears, letting out little hiccups in the back of my throat instead. "Does this mean I can't have my own family and all?" I asked the elders. My voice was barely a whisper. "That's not for us to say, baby," one of them said, pitying me. "We only control the deaths." I nodded. I curled the paper up and put it in the black charm bag, and then I tied it around my neck. I started my shift expecting a dead day. It was a Tuesday, and the college town where I worked was often fairly sleepy by 7 p.m. After bullshitting with Jeffrey, my friendly yet vacant coworker, I retreated to the back office of the pizza parlor, packed full of old receipts and pizza boxes. I could see Jeffrey milling about the kitchen, preparing one of the pizza requests that evening. On the monitor showing the front of the restaurant, I saw our delivery driver preparing to leave for the customer's house. It was nearly closing time when we finally got another call. Jeffrey grumbled about it being late, but answered. I noticed he looked mildly confused. Our delivery driver was still out, so Jeffrey told this to the customer on the other side of the phone and promised it wouldn't be too long of a wait. All good? I asked after he hung up. Yeah. Jeffrey looked troubled, an unusual sight. Normally, there wasn't much that bothered him. He couldn't remember his problems long enough for it to matter. It was a weird call, that's all. Weird in what way? I asked. Were they rude? Nah, that's normal. Jeffrey chuckled. This was different. How? He sighed. I don't know, man. He turned away from me to begin the order. I shrugged. I suppose if he didn't want to tell me, he didn't have to. Once Jeffrey was almost done with the pizza, I decided I should help out. I was about to start compiling the other parts of the customer's order. Some sodas. When I realized we were out of the flavor they requested. Ah, shit. I muttered. Hey, Jeffrey, we're out of that soda. Let me call them back. Jeffrey huffed in response. I went to the phone on the wall and redialed the last number. To my confusion, the line was dead. Hey, this number isn't working, I told Jeffrey. Jeffrey turned and frowned. That's weird. They just called. I know, I said. Oh well. Let me see if I can find the number from the address they gave you. Jeffrey motioned to the order he was referencing on the counter. Feel free. I don't care much if they don't get their soda anyway. I think the address said Lake Street. Maybe that's by the mill. Bad service. I shrugged in response. I took the address to the backroom computer and Googled it. To my surprise, the address didn't bring up anything. Have they given us a fake address? Who orders a pizza to a fake address and cancels their phone number? Was it just a prank? Did Jeffrey write it down wrong? I was about to look further into it when I heard Jeffrey shout in the kitchen. Dude, come here. I ran to the kitchen to find Jeffrey staring at the freshly cooked pizza sitting on the counter. It looked normal. What? I said, mildly irritated. Just look. Jeffrey insisted. I am. What am I supposed to be looking? Oh, I recoiled. The molten cheese of the pizza was squirming. What is that? I don't know, man, Jeffrey said. He reached out his fingers as if to touch it. I don't know about that, I cautioned. Jeffrey poked it anyway. As soon as his finger touched the cheese, it reverted back to a normal, perfectly still pizza. We stood there for a moment in silence, unsure of what to do. After a bit, Jeffrey extended his middle finger and poked it again. This time, the cheese gave way, and his finger sunk into the pie, all the way to his first knuckle. Jeffrey hesitated, then pressed further. his fingers sinking to the second knuckle. "What the hell?" I muttered. "Shouldn't you be through the pizza by now?" I inspected the counter, confused. His fingers should have touched the metal counter already. Jeffrey laughed nervously. "I don't know, man," he said. I retreated to the back room to grab my cell phone, wondering if I should do something. When I glanced at the security camera monitors, I saw that they were both showing static rather than the usual image of the pizza parlor and the parking lot. I ran back to the kitchen to find Jeffrey elbow deep in the mutant pizza, the cheese stretching around his arm like spandex. "This is incredible," Jeffrey marveled. I didn't know what to do. At least it didn't seem dangerous. "Come here," Jeffrey said, motioning at me with his other arm. I shook my head, my feet firmly planted where I was. "Come on, try it. It feels so weird," Jeffrey said. He took his hand out, shockingly completely devoid of saucer cheese. I hesitated, then stepped forward. I slowly pushed my fingers into the cheese, tensing my body in anticipation of burning cheese. Instead, the cheese felt soft. It gave way easily to my hand, stretching easily as if I had stuck my hand in a stocking. My whole hand was in the pizza now. It felt oddly pleasant. I could feel the sauce swirling around my fingers, but it wasn't too hot. I pulled my hand out, surprised to find it clean just as Jeffrey's had been. "What the fuck is going on?" I exclaimed. Jeffrey laughed. "I know, man. This is fucking nuts." He moved to put his own hand back in, but I shook my head. "Aw, come on." "I don't think we should mess with it anymore," I said. I went to the back of the store, hoping to find security camera evidence of the experience. But when I rewound the tape, I just found useless static. I put it back to the live feed and saw Jeffrey about to stick his arm in again. Just before his fingers touched the cheese, the cameras hit static again. I went back to the kitchen, arms crossed. "Man, I told you not to," I scolded. "I couldn't help it. It feels so cool," Jeffrey said. He swirled his arm around contentedly. "It's really nice, like a spa." I chuckled, but at that moment, Jeffrey's whole body jolted alarmingly. Jeffrey cried out and tried to pull his arm back out, but he seemed to be glued to the pizza. Skeptically, I raised an eyebrow. "Don't fuck with me, man," I said. "Dude, I'm not," Jeffrey shrieked. "Help me." "Maybe we can cut off the pizza around it," I said hastily, scrambling around the kitchen for a pizza cutter or knife. Jeffrey began to sink faster. I rushed to his side to pull him out, yanking on his torso and shoulder, but to no avail. The pizza rose rapidly up to his shoulders. "Take a deep breath," I shouted, though I doubt it would help. Jeffrey followed my advice just as the pizza swallowed his head. When the crust reached his other shoulder, I heard a sickening snap as the pizza collapsed his body like a foldable lawn chair. I heard a muffled scream from the pizza. Horrified, I tried to pull on Jeffrey's waist, but it was no use. The pizza was too strong and too fast. I fell to the ground as the soles of Jeffrey's sneakers were enveloped by the pizza. For a moment, I sat there on the sticky linoleum floor, in disbelief and shock, panting. I rushed to the back room to check the cameras. but they had returned to normal and the static masked any evidence of what happened to Jeffrey. On the other monitor, I saw our delivery driver pull into the front parking space of the restaurant. I went back into the kitchen, still in shock. The pizza sat innocently on the counter, the golden melted cheese still appearing to be perfectly untouched. Boredom is hitting everyone hard right now. With social distancing a top priority, we are all finding interesting ways to keep ourselves occupied. I think I may have ventured a little too much though. It all started 3 weeks ago, sitting in my bedroom. I tossed a softball into the air for a few minutes before I sat up on the edge of my bed. I looked over at my laptop I had been neglecting since I dropped out of college. I turned it on and began surfing. Nothing much had changed on the net. I visited all the regular sites I used to: Pinterest, YouTube, and Tumblr. I thought about what I could do with that piece of technology. This triggered a craving I had for a long time. The want to visit the dark web. I had heard only terrible things. It's a place to find organs, drugs, and weapons. I had no use for any of those things, but still, curiosity got the best of me. Before I knew it, I was downloading the browser that would bridge my access. Aside from all those scary things I could find on the dark web, I had seen some videos a while back about mystery boxes. You can pay anywhere from $5 to hundreds of dollars for a plain brown box filled with goodies. The contents were undisclosed, hence the mystery part. This could be something fun, as it was definitely enticing. A 5-minute search landed me on a site that had exactly what I was looking for. Now, I did not have much cash to just blow, so I kept a modest budget of $20. I searched through countless sellers, although I could not exactly tell you why. There was no way of determining which would be the best option, since the descriptions were quite vague. Still, I was a little nervous. I was flushing a crisp Jackson down the toilet. Knowing my luck, I'd receive a box with a chewed up piece of bubblegum inside. My laptop was one of those you could fold in half and turn it into a tablet. So I decided for fate to choose my purchase. I entered my budget in the filters and converted my laptop to tablet form. I closed my eyes and swiped my finger upwards, then pressed down to make my selection. The selection was not all that great, but I was tired of searching already. I read through what was available. Mystery box, life-changing, valued at priceless, my loss, your gain, winky face. Sounded good enough to me. My lips pursed as I typed in my credit card information, name and address, as if my body was not agreeing with what I was commanding. The box arrived just 3 days later. I could hardly contain my excitement as I carried it into my bedroom. I sat it on my bed and studied it a bit. No return address. Typical. My fingernails began picking at the tape and tearing away. Pulling the flaps apart revealed sparkly tissue paper. Cute. The content inside? Not so cute. There was a muddy pair of shoes. No big deal, I guess. But it was a little weirder that the pair of shoes seemed brand new. The soles were not worn out. The tongue did not have any creases and wrinkles that you would expect. and the insides were almost spotless. The next item was tiny, black, crushed velvet bag. The kind of bags you pull closed with strings. The feeling was not very impressive. I shook the bag around a bit and thought it sounded like little rocks inside. I pulled the mouth apart and poured out the contents into my hand. An audible "fuck" escaped my lips. My hand flipped over to break the contact it had with my skin. They scattered. Teeth? Really? I let my body rid the creeps by giving a little shiver. I peered back in the box. One more item remained. A diamond ring. Maybe this box wasn't such a dud after all. I'm no jeweler, but I did know that a quick look at the band of authentic gold would most likely result in finding the carats in small print. $18K. Not bad. I sized up the ring, which was visibly small. I wondered if I could have it altered. I might as well get something usable out of this. The next day, I carried my small finding to a local jewelry shop. I inquired about the authenticity, which they verified. A small fee, and a day later, I was sporting new ice. I was pleased with my purchase enough to leave a modest review to my seller. But when I tried to rate him or her, my laptop froze up. I tried everything I could to reboot with no success. Holding down the power button, closing and reopening, pressing a combination of keys. Finally, I gave up and let it do its own thing. An hour later, it finally powered off and restarted. I blew this off as a mandated update. The screen displayed the typical downloading files, followed by a slow restarting bar filling horizontally. After all that mess, I did not bother to revisit the website. I had probably caught a bug on the damn thing, and was lucky it still worked at all. My day was interrupted by a knock on the door. At the other side of my door stood a man who towered over me. I only poked my head out and placed my hand on the outside of the door, almost hugging it, obviously uncomfortable with an unexpected visitor. The man at the door verified my name, then asked if I would follow him down to the station, just to ask me a few questions. Station? What station? I asked. The police station, he responded. In the middle of us talking, I noticed he was staring at my hand, which I jerked away, still unconvinced with what this was all regarding. Regardless, I was too scared to question him, and did as he asked. We arrived at the police station where I was guided into a small room. Only a desk and 3 chairs were inside. A video camera in the corner. The officer proceeded to ask me questions. Where I was on some night 3 years prior. Where I was on some night 8 months prior. If I knew a young woman by the name Selena Ramos. If I was familiar with a lady named Melody Stacy. It was all a bit much to take in, but I gladly obliged, as I had no idea where they were going. I knew I had done nothing wrong. I knew I had nothing to hide. I knew that the faster I answered their questions, the faster it would be all over with. I remained in that room for hours. He asked the same questions, in different formats, in an attempt to catch me in a lie. He asked for my permission to search my home, grab what they needed, get my fingerprints, all that good stuff. Again, as I had nothing to hide, I agreed. Trying to explain where the things came from was no use. They only circled back to my search history. They claimed to know this was my scapegoat, and even advised me I wasn't going to get out of this one. The officer stated, "We are not buying your bullshit. There was no black web visited from your computer. There is no purchase made from Wolves 384. Just face it, we got you." That was enough to make my tears stop. I cocked my head sideways and said, "Excuse me? What did you say?" I continued, "Wolves 384? How did you know the name of the seller?" I couldn't even remember the name of the seller. For a millisecond, I saw him swallow a heavy gulp, then he fixed his tie. "Cut it out. You told me. That's what you said when you were at your house," he said. No, you're lying. I didn't say shit. You didn't even tell me why you were there. Why the fuck would I bring that up?" Like clockwork, a second detective enters the room and interrupts me. He doesn't say anything, besides officially putting me under arrest for kidnapping, murder, false imprisonment. I believe there was more, but I did not catch everything. My surroundings became fuzzy. I felt like I was going to be sick, and my hearing was fading in and out. I just spoke with my lawyer. He says they have a solid case against me. They found Selena's teeth at my apartment. They caught me with Melody's wedding ring, and the shoes they had photographs of me throwing away matched the shoe prints left at Melody's crime scene. My laptop had gruesome photos of their bloated and rotted bodies. My search history was criminal, such as how to frame someone for murder, how to create faux searches, how to hack someone's computer, not to mention the anonymous tip they have on file claiming I had gotten drunk one night and confessed to the murders. I don't even fucking drink. Worst of all, being such an introvert and loner, I have no way to prove my locations for the dates provided. There's no use. I stand warned that I need to sign a plea or risk death penalty. The cases have been going for years now. The government is ready to solve it, and nothing closes a case better than the guilty plea. "Okay, can't wait for you to get home. I'll heat you up some of the lasagna." My husband's voice suddenly cut off. I glanced at the phone. "Emergency calls only," displayed almost as if mocking me. Strange. This area isn't normally a dead zone. I muttered to myself as I slipped my phone into the cup holder next to me. Probably for the best with this thick fog rolling in. I tried to enjoy the silence and focus on the road as I drove. This late at night, I hadn't seen any vehicles for miles and suspected that I was probably the only person driving in the area. The fog had started to grow thicker. I had just started to slow down for safety when I saw an old woman wandering along the road in front of me. I know you're not supposed to pick up hitchhikers, but I doubted anyone else would be along to help her anytime soon. Besides, she looked so frail, so tired that there couldn't be any harm in helping her a little. I called out my window as I stopped beside her. "I can get you to the gas station. It's dark, and with this fog rolling in, someone may come along and not be able to see you." "Thank you, sweetie." She smiled as she collapsed wearily into the passenger seat. "You can call me Grandma. Everyone else does." "Nice to meet you, Grandma." I introduced myself as the car began to pick up speed. "I'm Marcy. If you want to turn the radio on, go right ahead." It's so hard to see, I dare not to take my eyes off the road enough to fiddle with the thing. There's no point in it. We wouldn't be able to pick up a radio station, even if you had a dashboard with an antenna." She laughed while she buckled herself with trembling hands. "Perhaps we can just entertain ourselves the way that my grandparents did. What are you doing out so late, if I may ask?" I explained that I was just on my way home after a long day at work. We'd had to stay late to finish a project. We then talked for a while about everything and nothing while we drove along that road. I was just starting to relax when Grandma gasped loudly as I flipped on my brights, hoping to see better. "Don't do it," Grandma yelped. "Just keep your lights on dim. You don't want to know what you can't see up there. Besides, the fog will just reflect the lights back and blind you." "What are you talking about?" I questioned as I glanced over at her. "What do you mean by, don't want to know what you can't see?" However, when I caught a glint on some twisted metal in the branches above, I hastily turned my lights back to dim. I was hoping to get you through this without you having known you were here. If I'm being completely honest with myself, I was hoping maybe I'd get out of here with you." Grandma sighed, and I saw her turn towards me in my peripheral vision. She took a few minutes to gather her thoughts before she spoke. "I'm not sure what or where even this place is, but visibility is always limited. The terrain and weather changes just before a new driver comes through. I suspect it's to blend in with where the intended victim was located. I think it somehow feeds off the victims. I've seen a few others that were trapped turn bad. Though, you can get out. I've seen it done." "So, I'm not trapped, but I'm still caught in a kind of web, so to speak?" I was skeptical. Sure, the terrain seemed a bit different than I was used to, but it was nighttime, foggy, and nobody actually pays that much attention to the scenery when they're focused on driving. Grandma chuckled softly. "Yeah, something like that. You're going to have to trust me if you want to make it out. Remember, I'm hoping to reach the other side with you." Grandma took a deep breath and let out a sigh. "I'm so tired of being trapped here. Never getting to stop and rest. Always on the move. I'm simply exhausted from it all." I nodded, but checked my rearview mirror for any traffic, looking for a sign that things were somehow normal. That's when I noticed some shadows rushing back and forth at an angle across the road, following my car. Surprised, I quickly looked out my window and saw more running along my car a good distance from the road. Given the visibility, they were a little more than the vague shape of shadows. "Focus on the road, Marcy," Grandma commanded. "Visibility is poor, and you don't want to get their attention too much. They're lost now, more lost than either you or I, but there's nothing you can do to help them." Grandma paused before continuing. "I'm not even certain that you can help me, but they certainly won't help you. Keep your eyes ahead. If it makes you sleep better at night to think that they're just some dogs or your imagination, then by all means, please do so." I tried. I really tried. It's like when someone says, "Quick, don't think of purple polka-dotted Dalmatians." And the only thing your mind can do now is think of purple polka-dotted Dalmatians. I couldn't help it. Every so often my eyes would drift up to the rearview mirror, partially out of habit, but mostly because I wanted to make sure they weren't getting any closer. Grandma loudly cleared her throat each time to get me to focus on the road ahead. Bless her heart. She tried so hard to keep me looking ahead and distracting me from my pursuers. I just couldn't keep my eyes ahead. Morbid curiosity, I guess. And I couldn't stop thinking about them. I didn't know what they were. I didn't know if they were safe. And each time, they just seemed a bit closer. You said that I am technically not trapped. Not yet, anyway. Grandma sighed. If they catch up to you, like they did me, they'll destroy our only means of escape, and you'll be trapped with the rest of us. Then eventually we'll both be just as lost as they are. Okay, but how do I escape? I questioned worriedly. My husband waited for me at home, probably worried about me since the call dropped on us. I wanted to get back to him and didn't want to think about either of us being without the other. Isn't it obvious? I've been walking this road for I don't know how long. I've tried running away from the road, but I always come back to the road. Your car is the only way we will get out of this, and if you keep bringing the lost closer, we are both doomed. Grandma snapped at me for looking back yet again. They were within 2 car lengths now, and I could almost make them out. They looked distorted, disfigured, and each one ran differently, strangely. It seemed as if in becoming lost, they had forgotten how to run as they rapidly ran along behind us. If you stop looking, they will get further away. I know it's the opposite of what our survival instincts say, but I've seen it work. Grandma tried convincing me as she wrung her hands in her lap. I was suspecting that she didn't know for sure if that would work, and was just hoping it'd get me to finally stop looking back. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my nerves as I went around yet another bend in the road. Lights. There were lights ahead. Big, fat, beautiful, glorious lights. I was going to make it. Then the car shuddered and I looked down at the fuel gauge. Slightly over empty. My car began to slow down, but I had a decent speed going. If I could just coast the car long enough, I might make it to the light. Without slowing down or touching the brakes, I slammed my car in neutral. Maybe it damaged the transmission, but that wouldn't matter if I didn't escape. I could hear them, behind and beside me, as their limbs slapped the ground. It sounded like they were all around me, closing in and ready to make their move. I wanted to look, to see how close they were now. That light, so tantalizingly close. I looked at it as the salvation I believed that it was. Something slapped the trunk of my car. I held my breath and closed my eyes. Just a little further. You'll see your friends again. We're going to make it through, Grandma. I promised desperately, fearfully. Maybe it was a prayer. I waited until I felt the car come to a complete stop. Then I opened my eyes. Grandma was gone. There was no sign of the fog. No shadows behind my car. Everything seemed so normal, I could believe that I somehow dreamt the whole thing. Except, the passenger seatbelt was buckled. A small piece of evidence that I'd really picked up an elderly lady and survived. Something. If you drive alone at night, keep an eye out for the road. Grandma said the terrain and weather changed. I'm pretty sure it moves around and anyone can find themselves on it. Keep your gas tank full, because you'll never know when you may be caught on that road. Keep your lights on dim, stay in your car, and don't look back. Shout out to my superfans, Sweet Black Swan and Tacy. I really appreciate you guys supporting my channel, and I look forward to creating more content for everyone.